Marcus Whitmore had built his empire on power, precision, and absolute control. From the 50th floor of his glass-walled office, he gazed down at the city, a kingdom he owned, a world that bent to his will. Billionaire, corporate shark, and one of the most ruthless businessmen in the industry. He had spent his life chasing success, stacking numbers in his bank account. Yet deep down, an emptiness loomed, a void he refused to acknowledge. Tonight was no different. His assistant had scheduled an urgent dinner meeting, and Marcus was already annoyed. He hated disruptions. He hated unpredictability. Then came the knock, a simple, unassuming sound. Marcus barely looked up when the delivery girl entered. She was small, dressed in a standard black uniform, her cap shielding her eyes. A pizza box in one hand, a payment receipt in the other. Nothing about her stood out, just another worker trying to make ends meet. "You're late," Marcus snapped without preamble, glancing at his watch. "I don't tolerate incompetence." She didn't flinch. Instead, she smirked. "My apologies, Mr. Whitmore," she said smoothly, her voice carrying a quiet confidence. "Traffic was brutal. Even money can't fix that, can it?" Marcus's brows lifted. Delivery people didn't talk back. They stammered, apologized, and left. But this one held her ground. "Excuse me?" She placed the box on his desk and held out the receipt. "It's $32.75. Cash or card?" Marcus let out a dry laugh. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" "Someone who owes me $32.75. Her gaze met his, unwavering. For the first time in years, Marcus was at a loss for words. There was something unsettling about her presence. Not her appearance, not her job, but the way she carried herself, composed, unintimidated. As if she wasn't just a delivery girl standing in the office of a billionaire, but an equal. Something inside him stirred. "Interesting," he murmured, reaching for his wallet. Little did he know, this was the moment his entire life would change. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching her with quiet intrigue as he handed her a crisp $100 bill. "Keep the change," he said dismissively. The girl didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head, amusement flickering in her sharp hazel eyes. "Generous," she mused, "but I can't accept tips that exceed company policy." Marcus raised a brow. "And what happens if you break the policy?" She smirked. "I'd be violating contractual terms. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The sarcasm hit like a slap. Marcus wasn't used to being spoken to this way, especially not by someone delivering pizza. His curiosity deepened. "Who are you?" he asked, folding his arms. She took the receipt from his desk, scribbled something on the back, and slid it toward him. "Mary Carter," she said simply. "Have a nice evening, Mr. Whitmore." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving him staring after her. The moment she disappeared, Marcus flipped over the receipt. Beneath the payment details in neat, precise handwriting, she had written, "Next time, read the fine print." A challenge, a taunt. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt something new. Not frustration, not superiority, intrigue. Something about Mary Carter didn't add up, and Marcus Whitmore never left a puzzle unsolved. Marcus couldn't shake her from his mind. It was absurd. A billionaire obsessing over a pizza delivery girl? Ridiculous. And yet something about her, her confidence, her sharp tongue, the way she carried herself, lingered in his thoughts. By the next morning, curiosity got the best of him. He called his assistant. "Find out everything you can about a Mary Carter, mid-20s, works for City Slice Pizza." Within an hour, he had a file in front of him. Mary Carter, age 25. No criminal record, worked multiple jobs. But what caught his attention was something buried deeper, something shocking. She wasn't just a delivery girl. She was a law student. Not just any law student, top of her class, specializing in corporate law. Marcus leaned back, a slow grin forming. "A legal genius delivering pizzas," he muttered. "Now that's interesting." That evening, fate, or perhaps Marcus's influence, intervened again. As he stepped into an upscale cafe for a meeting, he spotted her. Not in a pizza uniform this time, but in a simple black blazer, her hair tied back, books spread out in front of her. She hadn't seen him yet, completely absorbed in the legal notes she was scribbling. Marcus couldn't resist. He approached her table and slid into the chair across from her. Mary blinked, clearly surprised. Uh, can I help you? Marcus smirked. I believe you already have, she sighed, closing her book. Let me guess. You looked me up. I did. He leaned in, watching her closely. You're a law student, top of your class. So why the hell are you delivering pizzas? Mary exhaled as if she had been through this conversation before. Because law school isn't free, and neither is rent. Marcus drummed his fingers against the table. And yet, someone with your intelligence is wasting time delivering food? She met his gaze, unflinching. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Whitmore? Marcus chuckled. Would you take it? Mary tilted her head. Depends. Would you underestimate me again? That did it. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something more than business strategy and corporate domination. He felt challenged, and he liked it. Marcus wasn't a man who acted on impulse. His empire was built on calculated decisions, meticulous planning. Yet here he was, sitting across from Mary Carter, making an offer that wasn't in any of his business forecasts. You're smart, he admitted. You understand the law, and you clearly have no problem putting people in their place. Mary arched a brow. Is that a compliment or a warning? He smirked. Both. She sipped her coffee, studying him. And what exactly are you offering, Mr. Whitmore? Marcus leaned forward. An internship at Whitmore Enterprises, full access to the biggest corporate legal cases, hands-on experience most law students could only dream of. Her expression didn't change. And in return? Marcus chuckled. You work for me, learn from the best, and maybe teach me a thing or two about reading the fine print. Mary exhaled, tapping her fingers against her cup. Sounds tempting. But, he prompted, sensing hesitation, but men like you don't offer opportunities without expecting control, she said flatly. I don't want to be some charity case, Marcus. Something in her tone hit him harder than he expected. There was pride in her voice, independence, a refusal to be owned. I don't do charity, he said finally. I do investments. And you, Mary Carter, are a damn good one. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then finally she extended her hand. Then consider me your newest intern. Marcus shook it, his grip firm. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just business anymore. Mary's first day at Whitmore Enterprises was a spectacle. Employees whispered, eyes following her as she walked into the gleaming skyscraper. A delivery girl? Someone murmured. What is she even doing here? But Mary didn't waver. She held her head high, ignoring the whispers as she stepped into Marcus's office. He looked up, smirking. You survived the elevator ride. That's a start. She rolled her eyes. Let's just get to work. He handed her a thick folder. Here's your first assignment, a legal dispute involving one of our subsidiaries. Read through it and tell me what you find. Mary took the file and sat down, flipping through the pages. Minutes passed in silence as she scanned the documents, her brow furrowing. Then suddenly she smirked. You've been overpaying damages on breach of contract cases, she said, looking up. This clause here, it actually limits liability, but your legal team isn't applying it properly. Marcus raised a brow. You figured that out in 5 minutes? She shrugged. Reading the fine print is a skill, remember? For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Awe. Maybe he had underestimated her. Maybe she was more than just a delivery girl. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to change his life in ways he never saw coming. Mary's presence at Whitmore Enterprises sent shockwaves through the company. Some dismissed her as a passing whim of Marcus, assuming she'd be gone in a few weeks. Others, particularly the senior lawyers, saw her as an anomaly, an outsider who had no place in their elite world. But Mary wasn't there to fit in. She was there to prove a point. Her brilliance became impossible to ignore. She dismantled legal loopholes in contracts that even the firm's highest-paid attorneys had overlooked. She found inconsistencies in cases that had been deemed unwinnable. More than once, Marcus found himself pausing in the middle of a meeting, marveling at how quickly her mind worked. "You enjoy proving people wrong, don't you?" he asked her one evening, watching as she scribbled notes on a case file. She smirked. "You'd be surprised how often people underestimate me. I learned to make it my advantage." He leaned back, studying her. "That why you never told anyone you were studying law?" Her smirk faded slightly. "People like me don't get a seat at the table, Marcus. We have to build our own." There was something raw in her words, an unspoken struggle, years of fighting to be seen. Marcus understood that better than he cared to admit. One evening, after hours of strategizing over a high-stakes case, Marcus found himself watching Mary instead of the documents in front of him. The way her brow furrowed when she was deep in thought, the way she bit her lip as she analyzed a loophole. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Sharp, fearless, completely unimpressed by his wealth and power. "You should go home," he said eventually. She didn't look up. "Not until I figure this out." "Mary," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I mean it. Go home. Rest." She finally met his gaze. "I thought you liked workaholics." "I do," he admitted. "But I also know what burnout looks like." For a moment, the tension between them shifted. It wasn't just about work anymore. There was something unspoken hanging in the air, something neither of them dared acknowledge. But just as quickly as it came, it was gone. Mary exhaled, closing the file. "Fine. But if I solve this before your team does, I expect an apology." Marcus smirked. "If you solve this before my team does, I'll take you to dinner." She froze. And for the first time since they met, Mary Carter didn't have a witty comeback. The next morning, Marcus found an email waiting for him. Attached was the revised legal strategy. Flawless, bulletproof. His team had spent weeks on the case. Mary had solved it overnight. She had won. Marcus stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across his face. He picked up his phone and sent a single message. "Marcus, pick a restaurant. I owe you dinner." Mary chose a small, family-owned Italian place. Nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed billionaire dinner date. And yet, as they sat across from each other, plates of homemade pasta between them, something about the moment felt different. "You didn't have to actually take me to dinner," she said, twirling her fork in her pasta. "A bet's a bet," Marcus replied, "and I always pay my debts." She studied him. "That what this is? A debt?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Number, I just wanted to have dinner with you." For the first time since they met, Marcus wasn't the powerful CEO, and Mary wasn't the underestimated delivery girl. They were just two people, sharing a meal, pretending the world outside didn't exist. But deep down, they both knew. This wasn't just dinner. It was something more, and that terrified them both. Marcus had spent his life in control of his business, his decisions, his emotions. But with Mary, control felt impossible. She challenged him, intrigued him, made him feel things he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But with those feelings came a terrifying realization. Mary wasn't just another passing interest. She was different, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid of what that meant. The media caught wind of their growing closeness. Photos of them leaving the restaurant surfaced online. Headlines speculated wildly. Was Marcus Whitmore, the untouchable billionaire, in love with a delivery girl? At the office, the whispers grew louder. "You're risking your reputation," David warned. Marcus didn't care, but Mary did. One evening, she showed up at his penthouse, her expression unreadable. "This can't happen," she said, her voice firm. He tensed. "What are you talking about?" She exhaled sharply. "This. United States. Whatever this is. I worked too hard to be seen as something more than just a girl who got lucky. And now they think I'm just another woman you're entertaining." His jaw clenched. "You think that's all this is?" She hesitated. "I don't know what this is, but I do know I can't afford to lose myself in it." Marcus had never been the kind of man to chase. If someone walked away, he let them. But watching Mary turn to leave, he did something he had never done before. He stopped her. "Don't go." She froze. "I don't care what they say," he continued. "I don't care about the headlines, the rumors, the board's disapproval. I care about you. Her breath caught. Marcus, tell me you don't feel the same way, he said quietly, and I'll let you walk away. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because the truth was, she did feel the same way, and that terrified her more than anything. The scandal escalated when a leaked video of Mary arguing with a senior attorney at Whitmore Enterprises went viral. She's just a gold digger playing smart, one headline sneered. She's after his fortune, another claimed. Mary wanted to disappear. She had worked so hard to prove herself, and now it felt like everything was crumbling. But Marcus refused to let that happen. At a press conference meant to address company matters, Marcus did the unthinkable. He turned the spotlight on Mary. Mary Carter isn't just the smartest legal mind I've ever met, he announced. She's the reason we won our last 3 cases. She's the future of this company. And if you think she got here because of me, you're wrong. Mary stood in the crowd, heart pounding. Marcus wasn't just defending her, he was declaring to the world that she mattered. And then he turned to the cameras with a smirk. Oh, and for the record, if anyone thinks she's here for my money, they should know. I think I'm the one who got lucky. The room erupted. Mary had spent her whole life proving people wrong, but for the first time, someone had stood up and proved her right. That night, Marcus found her on the rooftop of his building, staring at the city lights. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. I did, he replied, because I meant every word. She turned to face him. Marcus, what are we doing? He stepped closer. Something neither of us planned for. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Then finally Mary exhaled. You drive me insane, Marcus smirked. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. And before she could talk herself out of it, she kissed him. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. It was raw, real, and utterly unexpected. But maybe, just maybe, that's what made it perfect. Months later, Mary Carter was no longer a delivery girl. She was the newest junior partner at Whitmore Enterprises. And as she walked into the courtroom, Marcus sitting proudly in the front row, she realized something. She had never needed him to make her successful, but he had made her believe she deserved to be. And in the end, that was everything.